There are a lot of things that I like to work on and usually have a nice shop to work in. But sometimes, you know, you got to build what you can where you can. And not having a garage, living overseas and being in the Department of Defense and the military, I don't have a garage all the time. So something I've had to do was kind of just start making things work for me rather than just say I can't do it. A gear install for a Gladiator on Guam is in the it's a little bit more expensive than the States. It's multiple thousands of dollars. So I was like, before I even think about going ahead and spend the money on the truck, what could I spend the money on? And that's tools. So I want to show you what tools you actually need. Rather than spending the money on the labor, you could be investing in your future and things that you maybe enjoy down the road, and now you have the tools, the knowledge, and the know-how. And on this Tool Talk Tuesday edition, I would like to share with you what kind of tools you need to do a gear install. To start your gear install, you'll need some sorted sockets, metric. There are some standards that are kind of a direct replacement, like for example 13 millimeters, pretty close to 1/2 inch, but you want to make sure you're using the right wrench. So the assorted sockets, you'll need a 1/2 inch and 3/8 and a 1/4 inch drive, as well as some assorted bits and extensions. You'll need some assorted pliers, some things to take measurements with, and obviously gloves for protection. You'll need a couple of measuring devices. One will be an inch-pounds torque wrench. I do have a foot-pounds torque wrench as well that gives you a bending number. So as you spin the pinion, you will get your inch-pounds, and they'll need to be 30 to 40 with the Dana 44. You'll need a torque wrench and an inch-pounds torque wrench. I also have some larger sockets over here. This is great for driving the pinion bearing on before you hit it with the impact. Otherwise, you won't get the nut on the pinion. I've got sorted sockets here, 36 millimeters for some of the older Jeeps. The newer Jeeps use a 35 millimeter on the front axle ends. You don't actually need to remove the axle's nuts. You can actually take the axle apart without removing the nut on the end and then just pull the whole thing out as an assembly. 32, you'll have to have a 32 to do any kind of axle work. This is for the pinion nut. This is for any steering that you do on a Jeep. It's 42 millimeter. So you need some larger sockets. These are all like $10 or $20 on Summit Racing. Another tool you'll need is a very accurate way of measuring thousandths of an inch. I use this to measure the shim packs. These all look kind of alike nowadays. They're all made probably in the same factories. But this one is more of a hobby and do-it-yourselfer type tool. It's a very good tool, very accurate. It's done a lot of work for me, and it's really paid for itself. This is a good purchase right here, and it won't set you back too much. A set of tools that I trust and have had for a long time are my Craftsman screwdrivers and wrenches. You're going to need these for different things. You can use the screwdrivers to help kind of pry open or remove, and nobody ever wants to hear you say pry on a screwdriver, but there's times where I just use a flathead screwdriver to kind of lift up on for example, the crush collar on the axle is very tight, and you can just use the front edge of this just to kind of lift it up and slide that crush collar off of the pinion. I have a lot of old school Craftsman. Some of these are really big and very expensive back in the day when they were made in the United States. And they have the old school stampings. There's a couple in here I went back and bought, like Gear Wrench is a good brand. I only buy decent stuff. I don't buy the big box trucks type stuff because I think it's overpriced, but if you can go around and still find forged in the US type tools, I'm buying them up. I've had these for about 10 years. They quit making them in the US, but all of my wrenches are the older Craftsman, the 10-year-old Craftsmans that have lasted forever. I would put them up against any tool, and these are my go-to wrench open-end wrenches, box wrenches. And I also have a set of the ratcheting style, and they've all probably several $100s worth of wrenches right here. My next set of wrenches would be the, I have some Craftsman Hex wrenches. These are great, especially for ARB air lockers. They have some pretty good sized hardware on them that require these wrenches, and they're all the old USA made Craftsman style. These are actually Harbor Freight units that I got for a gift, but these are great in a pinch. These little Pittsburgh tool hex wrenches, they just grab them out and maybe do something in, interior or something, require a lot of torque or a lot of beating. And those are great for like little, again, hobbies. Probably one of my newest setup tools. I bought a set of Craftsman impact tools. This has just about every size impact socket you could want or need. This was pretty much everything I used to set up the axle. 15 millimeter was used to impact on to the bolts for the carrier, the 10 bolt carrier bolts, and they were hit to 150 foot-pounds, and I used those with a torque wrench set as high as it would go. And these were all the things that I really abused during the build. And there's a little bit of an extension here. There really wasn't need for any extensions at the axle build, but having, I think the biggest ones were 15 and 17, because I have a gear installer and gear puller that uses 17 millimeter. A lot of the impact style stuff where you're really hammering on things, when I show you the next tool, you're really going to want a good set of impact sockets. And I believe these set me back about $100, but these things will probably last forever. I'll unlikely have to replace these. Probably pass them on to my kids. Next set of tools is going to be what drives all of those sockets and all of the other hardware that I have. This is an impact for 1/4 inch, and that just slips in there, and it provides you, when these were tested, they would do up to 200 foot-pounds, which was pretty impressive for these little things, but I would use these for about 100 foot-pound type items. You can get these battery packs in 5 amp hour. These are the 1 or 2, but I like the lighter ones. Even though I could buy the bigger ones, I like the lighter ones because it makes the tool overall lighter. And when I'm doing just axle work, I don't need a lot of battery. I'm not, building a house. And then a good drill. Also, these are all the brushless. These are brushless models, so these are the really good ones. They're a little bit more pricey for the brushless, but they end up lasting forever. And then this is the big one. This thing weighs good, I don't know, 10, 20 pounds. It's pretty heavy. This thing will provide you advertised 1,200 foot-pounds. The ratings on YouTube and people who've actually tested these and put these against the Milwaukee, which is also a big one, it claims 1,400 foot-pounds. The Dewalt was found to have more torque than the Milwaukee, so don't trust the numbers. The advertising numbers is just to sell tools. But the Dewalt was the winner, and so this is probably this is the biggest time saver. This broke every axle nut I had to get off, or I had to do breaking down the axle itself. This thing just tore everything apart, made it very easy on me. I don't think I could have done the install. In fact, I know I couldn't have done that gear install without this tool. This is about $210 right now on Amazon, and that sounds like a lot, but it's a really good deal. It's a brushless motor. It's providing you with 1,000 foot-pounds of torque when it was tested in a shop environment. I put a light battery on it. I have a 2 amp hour battery that I put on it. I don't use the big heavy ones because it just has weight to the tool. And this thing did everything I needed to do for 2 Dana 44s and putting in 488 gears and ARB air lockers. This was the lifesaver. I would say this is the MVP of my tool set. MVPs. I have to say, all my boxes are Craftsman. I actually, when I get back to the States, I'm going to buy a full shop Craftsman box, thousands of dollars. I love this stuff. I mean, I know Craftsman's come a long way, but if you notice, a lot of my stuff's Craftsman. I feel like it's probably the good middle ground. It's not quite the high professional end stuff, but it's not also costing me that much. So I got this big box. This is I call this my axle build box. I've got a lot of really neat tools in here. This is going to have extra seals. It's going to have anything I need to set up pinions and install carriers. These are spacers for the carriers. You'll get a lot of these. I got setup bearings in here from old Dana 44s. I showed you guys reviews on that in my old videos. I've got this is my dial indicator. This is such a great little tool, and it's not all that expensive either. These are like 50 bucks at Harbor Freight. You can buy really nice high-end ones too. But this dial indicator gives me, you know, the thousandths of an inch that I need to set up the backlash. This is just super easy, cheap, replaceable tool. It's a good tool. It's reliable, and it's not, you know, it doesn't cost a fortune. I have some gear set up, grease in here. I've got bolts to hold on this behemoth of a tool, but I did a tool review on this by itself. So this is a $400 to $800 tool from OTC. I don't know what the box trucks charge for these things, but this is what they use to, and this is what I used in my video to separate the diff open and slide in the carrier without, you know, it falling out, or I'm having control of how easy the carrier is to slip in. It saves your ARB, air locker lines. It saves you heartache. It saves you a headache of trying to get the diff out with tools and prying and beating up your differentials. This I got a video. I'll put a link in the description for this. This is I think they sell them for $150 to $170. I think I got like the $165 unit. It included all the extra little bolts and parts and stuff to set up a diff. This thing is like I wouldn't call it the MVP. That's obviously the impact gun, the impact. But this is, if you're setting up carriers and diffs, this thing is worth its weight. 150 bucks is so cheap for such a really cool tool, and it's something to add to your, you know, to your tool list if you are going to set up diffs in the future. And this is good for all diffs all the way up to, you know, the big ones. This thing will do it all. And then just to have sorted parts in here for differentials installs. The next tool I would call the MVP, besides the impact, would be this Lisle 59-400 kit. This is the bearing installer. This is the race installer. It has a double length handle. If you buy the cheaper ones on Amazon that look like this, they don't have quite the right degree of angle for those races, and they don't have the second handle. And this goes into my air gun when I get my air tools back, because I'm overseas right now. When I get back to the States, I can put that in an air gun and it just air hammers, you know, that noise, you know, the wah. That thing will just take my air gun to the next level and allow me to put races and seals and everything on without hammering, because this is for the hammer. And then this punches that race in. So the new diffs have a race that look like this, and it's kind of funky because it has ball bearings in it. So it's kind of a double setup. But because I have, I think it might have been this one. That's a little too small. Is it this one? Yeah. You can see how that punches that race into its recess. These are like 1,000, 2,000 fit. They're going to be really difficult. So you grease these up, sand them down a little bit, get the rough edges off, and then pound them in with this thing. You don't have a set of this. I don't think I could have done the gear install without the impact and without the Lisle kit. This thing reseated a lot of the bearings and stuff. I replaced all my bearings in my diffs. I didn't have to do that at 1,000 miles, but I wanted to, since I already had it all apart, and I'd reset it up so many times that I felt like I probably put some wear on the bearings. I wanted to go ahead and put new stuff in. Could not have done it without this kit. Link in the description. I want to get to some odds and ends that I think on the bigger end. This is my drawer at the bottom of my small toolbox. This is the stuff that gets crap done when the right wrench or the right tool just won't do it. So I have a rubber hammer that kind of taps things on and off that I don't want to dent. I've got an old piece of 2-foot pipe that came off an old jack handle that I had when I was a teenager. Kept that old jack handle. This thing is my breaker bar. I put this on the end of my larger 1/2-inch, you know, ratchets, and I break them loose. And those Craftsman, I have beat the snot out of those Craftsman wrenches, and I got 3 of them. They're all USA made. They still have plenty of tightness to them. They're not loose and they're not broke. And I've cracked them with this thing. I actually use this on the 3/8 as well. Those Craftsman tools are holding up because I've really busted on them. This is with the Lisle tool I just showed you. This is a number 3 3-pound hammer. It's fiberglass or just kind of a plastic hammer, handled hammer, and then this 3-pound head. This thing has cracked everything loose that I've needed. This is as big a wrench I need, or a hammer as I've ever needed. And it really is I would call this the third MVP. You gotta have a big, good sized wrench to knock stuff loose and to get those pinion races in. They are no joke. They are very difficult to install if you don't do it right, and run a sander around the edges, and then use that Lisle tool with this hammer. I've got some bearing pullers. These are assorted bearing pullers. Some funnels just for changing oil out and things like that, just miscellaneous. And then this is the other thing. You cannot pull the pinion without a gear puller. So you're gonna need to get one of these. These are like 50 bucks. I think I got this as a Craftsman. I think I got this on Summit. I looked online today. They're 50 bucks on Summit. And I do actually have this really cool hammer. I know you're not building a house, but why would you use a hammer? But this thing has a head that moves. So let me see if it locks out. With that, you can pry things off. You can open up things on the end of the axle when you're pulling and prying. You need something that's really good pry bar. I also have some pry bars in here. I've got a good crowbar right here, good sized crowbar. I didn't really need this one, but just a Stanley crowbar. And I got there's a flat crowbar back there. So some of these assorted larger tools you're gonna want to do some heavy duty work on axles. You gotta have a good set of pry bars and hammers. Something else we talked about was some of the specialty tools we have. If you're doing lockers, you're gonna have to have a 1/4 inch, maybe a 3/8 tap, die and tap. This is what drills your hole and tap. Once you drill the hole, you tap it. That tap is what provides you the air locker. Got a couple different step bits here. This is actually a ream for putting in the high steer kits for the front end, so you can change the direction of how the steering system sits in the knuckle of the Jeep. So I think some of y'all will know what I'm talking about there. You need a good set of, there's another measuring tool. This is a good feeler gauge. Gives you all those thousandths of an inch. So you can feel everything out and get the right measurements. There's a small copper pipe cutter. Use that for air lockers. Not needed if you're just doing gearing. And then brass punches. You have to have a set of brass punches. I used these 2 skinnier brass punches to punch out the race. So when the race is sitting in the axle, there's actually a cutout in the steel casing of the axle, and you'll see the edge of it. And if you look, maybe you can see it. The great thing about brass is brass will not bend your components. And there's kind of it's kind of hard to see. But when you open the axle up, you'll see the back. There's a lip that'll be opened up to the edge here and the edge at the bottom and top. You'll get this inside there on the edge, hit it with that number 3 hammer that I just showed you, and you'll pound the snot out of this to get that race out. It's some physical work. Gearing is not for the faint of heart. So good brass punches, some steel punches in case you need to mark stuff, and that should take care of some of that. This, I think you've seen me use a couple of times in the video. This uses a large 36 millimeter. That's another reason I have a 36 millimeter socket for impact, and that my 1200 foot-pound Dewalt wrench will break this loose. Is you'll put that on your pinion or your carrier. So this will slide down in your carrier where your axle would go. This goes over top of that, slides down on that, and then your clamshell goes around that. And you'll see that in the axle install video if you go back and look. This setup, these gear installers are $400, $500, $600. This is a Yukon unit. It does not have, and this does not work for Dana 44s 2018 and plus. It'll only take off one side. So my recommendation is go ahead and buy the bearing kits and get the bearings for your new diff. If you have an old diff, you're just changing the gears on it, so it's not a big deal. But if you're pulling bearings off of your Rubicon or your open carrier, you're going to want to have one of these. The problem is this setup is built for older Dana 44s. It does not have the right clamping for the newer trucks. So I gotta say, this is a really cool tool. Not necessary. Just buy the new bearings for your new diff and don't worry about this $500 tool. This is just a nicety. I will say that I don't recommend getting this tool unless you're doing diffs for many different styles of trucks. This is just a tool junkie thing for me. So don't worry about this one. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this one, but you're going to need a set of good drill bits. These were used to tap the holes, to drill holes into the diff, to get things moved along through the chassis. You're going to need some good drill bits to add any kind of air locker. And this will also be used for 7/16 will be your, it's either 7/16 or 9/16, but I've got all kinds in here to set up your air locker and to use the tap. So you'll need a good set of drill bits that you can rely on. Spray them with some good grease and some cutting oil, and they'll drill right through any diff. Didn't take long. And then with the impact, there's a lot of impact ends on there, like that 1/4 inch you can see. It plugs right into that set of tools there. So this is a really good set, and that's really what you want to have when you're setting up a diff for an ARB air locker, or just having a good set of drill bits on hand. Also have, and we'll recommend, this isn't a necessity, but have a good rotary tool on hand with a drum disc. The drum disc will clean up the edges, and you'll want to run it around the new one just slightly. Just taking off, like you're just taking off just the skin. You don't really, just the surface of the bearing. You don't want to drill down into it and cut it so loose that when you put it in there it's sloppy. You're not going to have a good diff. But you're going to need to clean these up. I spent hours hammering on one of these. I cleaned it up with a rotary bit, and the axle went right together. So, and it was a pain to pop back out, because I had to pop those out to put spacers behind them. The spacer sits behind this and then sits in the axle, and that's how you get your pinion space. So you will have to pop these in and out, but if you have a rotary on there, when you put them back in, they'll go in hard. I mean, you still got to beat them in, but it'll go in. Before, it would not go in at all. It was almost like the thing was just so large. I tried to freeze the bearings. I tried to do all different things. Just hit it with the drum sander. I mean, just go around it lightly one time. I didn't go around it a lot. So I will recommend that you use a rotary tool. It'll save you a lot of time. One is, I just purchased these, but I have a couple sets of old ones. I use Impact bits now. Impact has just changed my life. I got away from drills and started using real hardware and real impact type of tools. This thing has these flex zones in them. They'll get things and break things loose without breaking the bits completely in half. You can also stick this on the end of your impact with this bit end, and then this impact will act like another smaller impact drill. Rather than using the big heavy one all the time, I use the lighter one, so my arm wasn't getting as tired. So I got a good set of impact bits. I would also recommend those. So I have a, if you're removing anything off an axle and you're cleaning up the seals before you put a seal back into your pinion seal, I recommend using these to kind of scrapers, or any kind of scraper you have. All right, and so now I want to work my way into a little bit less of the tools and what I use to actually install things. White lithium grease, obviously it does what it's supposed to do. You put it on the ends. That's more for things that you're trying to keep loosened up. Maybe put them on some screws. It also stops rust in Guam. I have a lot of salt water here. I repainted my axle after I broke the bolts loose, because I wanted it to look real clean. If you look at my axle videos, at the end, that axle looks like it's brand new from the factory. Just get some semi-gloss or flat black. I don't like the real glossy black, because I think it looks like garbage, but everything on the diffs kind of a semi-gloss or a matte. You got to use a ton of this stuff. Grab a couple cans of brake cleaner. This stuff is great. I mean, you can just it's just like a water hose. Just spray all the diff out. You're going to have a lot of filings left over and some metal shavings left over from after you beat these out of the axles. You got to clean that junk out, and don't leave that in the axle once you start chipping these corners. This stuff's real soft, so it'll leave a lot of little debris in your axle. You're going to want to hose it out with this stuff. So clean your axles up really good before you put it back together, or you will have damaged bearings and you'll have to go back in and redo it anyway. This stuff, I got a new truck, so I didn't have to use too much of this. I did use a can for other things and cleaning some things up. I got some gloss paint on here. I don't really use this for anything on the axle, but gloss is nice, because if you are adding a matte color and you want to gloss it in certain areas, you can use that to fix that. I got some nitrile gloves, some disposable rubber gloves. These kind of keep your hands a little cleaner. And then I bought a box of these. They're like 20 bucks, but I bought a box of these big shop towels. Man, when you have a bunch of mistakes you're making and you spill oil and everything everywhere, I just grab a towel and I could just do that to my heart's content. I don't have to go wash a bunch of towels. I buy a $20, $30 box of 100, and these little blue towels are just a lifesaver. And that kind of takes care of a lot of the little things. There's also the gear lube that I recommended in the videos. I keep a bottle of this on hand. It's like 20 bucks a bottle, but you're not changing gear oil that often. So put the good stuff in it. And you can use the higher weights, the 140 weight, if you're towing a lot. I'm not towing a lot and I'm on an island. So I was like, I'll do the 90 weight. You can also use 140 weight oil. Hey, thanks for joining me on this episode of Tool Talk Tuesday. I think that kind of gave you a great idea of what you really need to do a gear install. Gear installs run in the States, I think, about $1,000 plus skiers, roughly. Most shops will do them for $1,500, $1,600, and that includes the parts. So if you're buying gears, you probably are looking at a little under $1,000 labor. On island at Guam, it's about twice that. And the thing for me was, like, rather than spend the money and go ahead and have somebody do it, could afford to do that. But it was like, I want to buy the tools. I'm a tool junkie. I like having stuff in my shop and being able to do things for other people, maybe make some money on the side and pay for some of those tools. And it's just it's a different way of thinking for me. I just really enjoy the work and getting under here and working on a truck that only had 1,800 miles on it, and I'm ripping the diffs apart. You know, it's my warranty is not in the dealer. Hopefully, if something was wrong with the engine, that's definitely a whole other conversation. But if something breaks that I've repaired, I already know how to fix it. If it's on the trail and I break a U-joint, I know how to fix it. So I'm not as afraid to start messing with my axles. Those are the kind of things that I really enjoy. So there was only really 2 or 3 tools that I purchased since I did this gear install. It was the bearing puller, which is like $500. That's kind of a nicety. That's just a tool I've always wanted to have. You don't really need that tool. It's as I said in the video. The big one was the $150 case spreader. I did a review on that. I was so impressed with the quality of that tool. That guy actually now uses my videos in his advertising and in his sales on eBay. But to have the workmanship and the made in the U.S. for such a great price, it just goes to show you that there are still people in the U.S. that know how to make good, nice, well-made tools, or anything, and for that matter. And America is still a very do-it-yourself minded country. It was just refreshing to see that kind of workmanship in a tool for $150 to $200, depending on what you get with it, and then have it shipped all the way out here to Guam. The guy was just amazing, so I can't say enough about that. But most of the tools I already had. So if you're already kind of a tool person and you like to work on your trucks and cars, maybe your granddad or your brother, your father taught you how, or maybe you're self-taught. I'm self-taught. Over time, you had enough tools. Take it to that next level. You know, try gear installing a diff. It'll I think you'll enjoy it. If you really enjoy the work, you'll enjoy it. It is hard work though. So if you guys like this kind of stuff, click like and subscribe, and I'll get you another video. Thanks, guys.